everybody. I'm Georgia, and I'm here with other Christian outreach members, Jose
Hello.
and Morgan.
Hello.
And today we have a very special guest. He's coming on to speak to us about his work in Catholic Relief Services. His name is Terrill Kucera, and we're just gonna start now and have him go on.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for inviting me today, and I'm happy to talk to you all about my experience with Catholic Relief Services and really tie it to how the corporal works of mercy come alive in my personal experience and also within Catholic Relief Services. And I wanted to start off just telling a little bit about me and how I got started. So after college, I moved to the Dominican Republic for a year to learn Spanish. I got a job working with a small nonprofit organization within the orphanage system, and I really had no idea what I was getting into. It was my introduction into international work, and it took me about a year and a half to realize the organization I was working for was doing more harm than good. Our motto was very much centered around volunteer satisfaction, making people feel good about the work they're doing without focusing on community input or the actual impact being made. The organization ended up leaving 2 orphanages without any support. They changed their model, and most of the children had to leave. And what you'll see pictured here is I was 22 years old and trying to find a solution for just a few of the boys who had to leave the orphanage. And I became the legal guardian of 5 teenage boys for about 3 years. These were pivotal years for me because I rediscovered my faith, but also learned what holistic care meant, thinking about the boys' physical, social, emotional, spiritual, and psychological needs. I also confronted my privilege as both an American and as a white male. And to this day, I'm motivated to serve, to do the work I'm doing it, because I see it as a way to put my faith into action and use my privilege to amplify the voices of the most vulnerable. I became interested in furthering my studies after this experience to learn more about international work and models that could be successful overseas. So I went to St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas to get my master's in international relations. This is where I discovered Catholic Relief Services and heard about all the work they were doing around the world. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with CRS, we're the official international humanitarian relief and development agency for the Catholic community in the United States. We work around the world responding to natural emergencies like typhoons, earthquakes, hurricanes, as well as humanitarian emergencies like civil war or assisting people who have been displaced. We also do long-term development work, which is really accompanying communities in a lot of different areas. We currently work in over 110 countries around the world, and all of our work is done in partnership with the local community and local organizations. And this is essential to our commitment in upholding dignity, our belief that people should be the leaders of their own development. We serve on the basis of need, not creed, race, or nationality. And as a Catholic organization, we believe that all people have inherent dignity and that it's our duty to uphold that dignity no matter who they are, where they're from, or what they believe. We got started in 1943 to address the needs of survivors and refugees after World War III, and we've been in operation for more than 75 years. So my path, discovering CRS, I applied for a fellowship program and ended up in Madagascar and working on a project within youth entrepreneurship. I later went to work on a project in rural education in Afghanistan and then responded to Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas before coming back to San Antonio. And through CRS's work, I was able to see that holistic nature of international work, learn the importance of involving the community in project design and implementation, and see that really to make a difference, we all have to work together. And that's what CRS is all about, promoting human dignity together. And a good way to frame our work are the corporal works of mercy. So we know that spreading God's mercy is central to the mission of the Catholic Church. And the church calls on us to reach out to God's people in body and spirit. When we honor the life and dignity of a fellow person, sharing what we have with one another, that's really practicing the corporal works of mercy. I see these works of mercy as really what brings us together as human beings across cultures, religions, race, ethnicity. And today I want to share a few examples with you of how I've seen these come alive in the work I've been doing with CRS, and I'll be focusing my time on Madagascar today. But before I delve into stories, I kind of wanted to show you all this framework, integral human development, because I mentioned that our work is holistic. So while it's easy to categorize our projects and say, oh, we work in agriculture and nutrition and education and water security, our programs are really designed with local communities using this framework. And this framework is rooted in Catholic social teaching and seeks to promote the good of every person and the whole person. It looks to identify strategies based on people's quality and access to assets, so the resources that people have to work with. And I thought this was important because while we say, let's say we have an education project, we understand that a child's education isn't complete if they don't have access to clean water or proper nutrition or the language of instruction. So CRS designs its projects to address all of the root causes of global poverty. That's to say, when I get into these stories about feed the hungry or give drink to the thirsty, it's really looking to this framework to see how interconnected everything is. We can't feed the hungry without addressing climate change, which has wiped out people's crops, or without education to ensure communities know about proper nutrition and hygiene. So my first example is going to be feeding the hungry, which is the first corporal works of mercy mentioned by Jesus. For I was hungry and you gave me food. And in the Second Vatican Council, the church looked at the world and the surplus and excess of food that we have and cried out to individuals and governments to feed the people dying of hunger, because if you do not feed them, you are killing them. And Pope Francis has been direct as well, saying, let us remember well, however, that whenever food is thrown out, it's as if it were stolen from the table of the poor, from the hungry. So we're called as Catholics to both give food to those who are hungry and to help people find ways to gain regular access to food. And I want to start off with a story in Madagascar. Today, half the children in Madagascar are chronically malnourished. In the US, it's typical for a newborn baby to see a doctor about 10 times in their first year. However, in southern Madagascar, healthcare primarily rests with the parents, and they need to know the signs of malnutrition. Here you can see Franklin and her husband, Lavaladesi, talking to a community health worker in their village of Miari Betsileo. They're talking about nutrition for their 11-month-old son, Torin. Torin is their 8th and youngest child. And CRS introduced a community-led total nutrition program in Torin's village. This program focuses on mobilizing people in communities to adopt behaviors that improve nutrition for children who are 5 years old and younger. We work with government, community health workers, and community volunteers to teach communities optimal health and nutrition skills and habits. Franklin, the mom, has said he hasn't gotten any diseases so far compared to his other brothers and sisters. He looks stronger and he has more flesh than his siblings. Torin is healthier because his parents practiced the new skills that they learned through CRS's project. While she was pregnant, Franklin went to the health center regularly for checkups with a doctor. She practiced proper hygiene, and when Torin started eating solid food, his parents fed him a diverse diet, including vegetables and protein. And these are things that they didn't do with their other children. The phrase rainbow food is something you would hear a lot if you went to Miari Batileo, because this is something they're talking about what they learned. It's a simple way to emphasize the importance of eating colorful vegetables like tomatoes, pumpkins, carrots, green leafy vegetables, and other high nutrient produce. So that's an example from Madagascar on the holistic view of feeding the hungry. Give drink to the thirsty is the next corporal works of mercy that I'll be focusing on. And as we know, water is life-giving and life-sustaining. And as such, the church recognizes it not as another commodity, but that people have the right to clean, drinkable water. And many of our sisters and brothers in Christ do not have access to clean water. In a world where nearly 1 billion people are denied this right is a grave injustice. So we go to another part of Madagascar, in eastern Madagascar, in the district of Tuamasina. It's one of the most water insecure districts in the region, where less than 5% of people have access to clean water source. This is Serafina, who's lived in the Kucera village for over 10 years, using muddy water from the river as the sole water source for her entire family. However, Catholic Relief Services started a project to build community water points close to villages. So Serafina's house now has a water point where she can access clean water. She told us that she used to use yellow or brown water for so many years that it felt like a luxury to her and her family to use clean and colorless water for the first time and on a daily basis. She said that they live in a part of Madagascar where it rains almost all year long. So the more rain they had, the dirtier their former water source got. She said the anxiety of having to use dirty water during rainy seasons is gone, and the cleanliness of the water that they receive from the new pump is a miracle. She said she can finally drink and use clean water to wash her dishes. This project is really working towards innovative and viable solutions to water scarcity, not only to give access to water, but to help households adapt to climate change, increase agricultural production, diversify their livelihoods, and benefit from health and education services. Last, I want to talk about sheltering the homeless, or welcoming the stranger is another way of saying that. And right now, there are more displaced people now than ever before, nearly 80 million people, forced by poverty, violence, persecution, and other reasons that they might have had to flee their homeland. We're called to support our sisters and brothers on the move and welcome them into our own communities. And so I really wanted to highlight the story of Carmen Ramos, who's one of our volunteers here in the US. She's the former president of Young Adults for Christ, so Jóvenes para Cristo. And she's fearless when speaking about her faith, God's mercy and love, and the call to put our faith into action. So when she had the opportunity to travel to Washington, D.C., pre-pandemic to take part in the National Catholic Council for Hispanic Ministries Advocacy Day, she jumped on the chance. She was part of a delegation from California to meet with members of Congress to address challenges facing migrants and refugees and the needs to support them. Carmen was able to give her own personal testimony during her meetings with her members of Congress. And although she was nervous, she believed God would use her as a channel to speak to the needs of each of her brothers and sisters and those she came to advocate for. Their needs, she explained, makes her speak from her heart. Carmen looks to the Blessed Mother as a model, comparing advocacy to intercessions. She said, imagine if our Holy Mother, the Virgin Mary, would not advocate or intercede for our requests. What would happen? She asks, we must shout and say, here I am for the one who cannot speak, to amplify the voices, the one who cannot raise their voice. And she said, even if we're afraid or think the situation is unchangeable or that no one will listen, we must have faith. So I just wanted to give y'all that example of what we're doing in the US to kind of address these needs, and how the work of CRS really takes root not only globally, but locally as well. So thanks for y'all's time. I'm happy to answer any questions y'all might have. Hopefully I didn't rush through that too quickly.
Thank you, Terrill. That was awesome. I'm sure the everybody on Imago Christi Day will take into account what you've said and put it towards their work today. Now, we do have a few questions from the student body on your work in CRS that they wrote down together. The first one being, what was the most pressing issue that you have encountered on your travels?
I would say that, honestly, the issue is inequality around the world. And that could be wealth inequality or racial inequality that kind of is systemic in a lot of the work that we do around the world. So I would say a lot of the pressing issues about the root causes of global poverty kind of come from that. I would say in Madagascar, for me anyway, in the southern region, climate change has had a huge effect. So they have kind of droughts that are going on, that people barely have access to water, and they're eating cactus as their main food. So I would say, like, really seeing that in person was probably the most pressing issue I've experienced.
Sounds like you've been able to travel around a lot, but what do you think the hardest part of your job is in general?
I would say it's really keeping up that awareness of my role in what I'm doing. I think one of the reasons I moved back to the States and I'm doing what I'm doing now is my role kind of as a US citizen is to say what are the root causes of global poverty that are being caused by the US as such a powerful country? What are the policies that we need to address here to ensure that the global world has what they need? So I think the hardest part of my job is really having that awareness of my privilege and my role and making sure that I'm using my role and my privilege on a daily basis to make the world a better place.
What is one interesting thing that you learned from your trips?
I would say the most interesting thing is just seeing how we're all connected, even beyond culture, religion, race, ethnicity. I think my expectations when I moved to Afghanistan were kind of, hey, I know what the news talks about. I know what my parents are saying about me moving to Afghanistan, but going there and just feeling so welcomed by the people and really understanding where they came from and their stripes and that we're all human. I think that's the most interesting thing is just going to a different culture and discovering that, hey, we actually have a lot in common.
Thank you. All right, so that's all we have for today. Thank you for coming on. This whole Savio community thanks you for speaking today. It was very special. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much for having me.